Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and do me a favor and go ahead and look at this set of stats. These are career regular season statistical splits of former number 4 overall pick Josh Jackson by month. Every single statistical category improves dramatically as the months go on throughout a season, which is weird, right? Like, why does this happen? It's not like he's suddenly a better basketball player in February than he was in November in a given year, right? Maybe he's a little bit better, but not enough to explain this level of variance. And that's what I want to go over in this video, a theory that I've thought a lot about in the past and have thrown around in podcasts, but never really fully explained in a video. What, as I call it, the Josh Jackson theory is. Okay, so let's break this down, beginning with the obvious. As we look at these splits, how can this be explained? Well, first up, he's playing more minutes, right? Like anytime you're on the floor for more minutes, most players are going to produce at a higher volume in all three of these categories. Now, that certainly doesn't entirely explain what's going on here because these are hugely significant statistical jumps from month to month, and it's completely linear. They always go up the longer into the season you go, and for a guy to go from an 8-point per game score in the beginning months of a given season throughout his career, by the way, this is not this season, this is not his rookie season, this is every single season of his career combined, for the difference to be that dramatic in the beginning of season compared to March, something else has to be going on here. But to state the obvious, he's receiving more minutes as illustrated by the now expanded graphic at the bottom showing the minutes in addition to the splits. However, the other part of this, and really the core of this whole theory, is that the rest of the league generally starts to tank around the time that these stats start to go up. And this is twofold. So for example, when Josh Jackson was on the Suns, generally wasn't that effective of a player. When he was on the court, they generally were not a better team. However, as it became more and more clear that they were not going to push for the playoffs and they were going to develop some of their younger players, let's say, maybe tank a little bit, try and get a better draft pick, Josh Jackson is suddenly receiving more minutes because the detriment that he has to the team overall in terms of winning the game is now a positive because they want to lose, right? And he's developing, he's getting more shots, he's building up his confidence. So there's that side of it. But then pretty often on 40% of NBA games or so, once you get post All-Star break, February, March, and the beginning of April, teams are playing not as good lineups, right? Like you can play against a team with 3 G League guys on the floor to start the game just because of maybe some injuries are piling up. Guys are starting to rest more. Successful teams even aren't tanking. They're trying to rest their players leading up to the postseason, and teams that are really bad are being really cautious and bringing back their players from injury or just resting them in general because they want to tank. So not only is Josh Jackson and other younger players, when we expand this theory a little bit later, you'll see, not only are they getting more minutes on their team and getting more opportunities, but they're playing against bad NBA players or straight up non-NBA players on some nights, which means their production is going to go up. And to be honest, this happens all the time. Josh Jackson gets his name attached to this theory because it's the most stark contrast of the theory overall of players increasing their production the later you get into the season. But the other really big common example I can give for this is Trey Burke. He was kind of floating around. He wasn't really doing anything on a different number of teams, right? And then he got this huge opportunity at the end of the season for the Knicks and started averaging like 16 points per game for the last 2 months of the season. And I remember making a video, I can't even remember what the video was about, but I talked about Trey Burke potentially breaking out or something like that. All right, before I get started with this entry, I want to say, more than any other spot on this list, when I say that Trey Burke could get a huge contract offer that is relative to his current salary standing in the league. He likely isn't going to be getting an offer worth 8 figures annually, but he very well could get a sizable raise if his play near the end of the season for the Knicks holds up. After signing with New York in January, he went on to post the best numbers of his career since his rookie year in a lot fewer minutes per game. And I essentially was telling people, pump the brakes. Like, he's getting a lot of opportunities. This Knicks team isn't very good. He's never been this good of a scorer on any other team. Like, maybe this isn't real. And I got a lot of hate for people saying, oh no, if you watch the games, Trey Burke is clearly an NBA level scorer and he's going to be really good. Trey Burke is still in the league, but he's not averaging 16 points per game for anybody, right? And that would have been an example of this Josh Jackson theory. Trey Burke was not suddenly a better player than the exact same guy that a whole bunch of different teams had bounced around. The Jazz drafted him relatively high and he bounced around all these other teams. He didn't suddenly get a lot better when he showed up in New York. was the opportunities that he got, it was the minutes he was receiving, and it was the teams that he was playing against. And yeah, sure, maybe, some players fit better in a certain system than others. And maybe some players need more shots and opportunities to be successful. It builds up their confidence. I'm sure there's a part of that, right? But mostly it was this Josh Jackson theory. And I bring up all this to say, this is the time of the year that we're in right now. This Josh Jackson zone, that's the time of the year that we're in right now. And you're going to start to see it, I promise, over the next handful of weeks and month and a half or so, you're going to start to see those graphics on Twitter of guys being like, oh, look at this guy over the last couple of weeks. I know you all wrote him off, former draft bust, but Dragan Bender is suddenly averaging 10 boards a game and shooting 35% from three. Look out for Dragan Bender. That's just an example. I have no idea if he's actually going to play well, but you're going to start to see some of those, right? Typically, it's with younger players. Typically, it's guys that are former draft busts, which I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand and say Josh Jackson is a draft bust at this point. I understand he's still young, but the Suns were heavily invested in him as a former number 4 overall pick and just gave him away. Typically, it's going to be players like that entered this Josh Jackson zone part of the season. They get more minutes, they get more opportunity, they get more offensive responsibility. They're playing against bad teams, and suddenly they look like a really productive NBA player. Whereas in the beginning of the year, when they're not getting those same opportunities and they're playing against real NBA teams that are all playing hard to NBA standards on a given night, suddenly they're not as good. So I bring this all up to say, this is kind of like a PSA. This is kind of like a beware. It's not that, all increases in production from young players later in the season are false. However, just pump the brakes a little bit on some of it. And one that I would definitely bring up for this season is Cam Reddish. I've seen a lot of Cam Reddish love lately on my timeline. Cam Reddish was awful to begin this season, almost like Josh Jackson levels of awful in terms of efficiency from the floor to begin his career and things like that. Suddenly Cam Reddish is starting to play better. He's getting more shots. He's getting more minutes. And maybe that's just his confidence. He's a very young player. Maybe he needed a little bit more time to develop. Absolutely possible. But I think it's also possible that maybe the Hawks are just playing teams that aren't very good. Cam Reddish is getting more shots. He's building up his confidence. And then we're going to go roll right back around to the beginning of next season. People are going to be saying, oh, Cam Reddish had a really nice end of the year last year. And then he starts the season and he's shooting 35% from the field again. Like, I'm just saying that's possible, okay? That's one that I would definitely look out for as potentially being the next member of these Josh Jackson theory, not very good in the beginning of the season, really good late in the season Hall of Fame. And what I would love to know as we wrap up this video is you guys have any examples of players in the past that maybe it caught you a little bit, right? Like you were caught up in the hype a little bit of a player playing well to end a season and it ended up not being true. And or any that are happening this season, right? That you're looking in, maybe Cam Reddish is one of them, but you're looking and you're seeing a lot of love about this particular player, but you're kind of like, are they really that good? Or you're invested, you're like, I think this guy is actually really good. I want to know all of it because this is something that is pretty difficult to research other than just like remembering the narrative around a player. Like I would have to go and look at the individual splits of a whole bunch of random players and just kind of figure out, oh, is this, a candidate for the Josh Jackson theory? So the best resource that I have to research this is you guys and saying, hey, check out this player, his splits are crazy, or check out this guy this season. Again, a Cam Reddish type player that suddenly is playing better. Typically, your search is going to be younger players, high draft picks in the past, or sometimes it is veterans that have bounced around and suddenly are, playing well on a good team, like Tyreke Evans playing in, where was he playing? Playing in Memphis? I think he was playing in Memphis, and then he got that big contract with the Pacers, and now he's like banned from the league for 2 years. That is another one that isn't necessarily part of the Josh Jackson theory because that was just him playing for a bad team and getting opportunities. But guys like that, that's the best way that you can help me further research this theory and we can expand on this is you guys saying, hey, I remember in 2015 when I can't even off the top of my head remember a name, when Furkan Korkmaz was shooting the ball really well and people thought he was the next guy, or Bruno Caboclo was playing really well at the end of a season, right? Those are the kinds of guys I need you to look into, I need you to research for me. This is my call to action so we can further prove the Josh Jackson theory and the Josh Jackson zone. So in summary, this is a real thing. Josh Jackson is like patient zero for the theory itself, not necessarily the first guy, but he's the first time that I really realized what this was. It's a real thing, and beware of some of your maybe favorite young players like Cam Reddish potentially falling into this trap and thinking they've turned the corner when in reality, that's not the case. Sometimes it's legit, but this is a real thing, guys. Getting more offensive opportunities and responsibilities as you get later in the season, playing against bad teams, and suddenly putting up better statistics. Beware of the Josh Jackson zone and theory. But yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.